You ever wake up to the sound of something burning, the kind of crackle that doesn't belong in the quiet of dawn? That's how my story started, with smoke rising from what used to be my great-grandfather's corn barn, the air thick with diesel and oak, and a woman named Brenda Whitmore who thought she could erase 70 years of family history just because she didn't like how it. Surrounded by a new suburban kingdom called Maple Ridge Estates, a maze of beige McMansions with perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, and residents who lived and died by their HOA's commandments. Proud. The barn wasn't just wood and nails, it was my family's heart. My great-grandfather, Patrick Callahan, built it in 1952 with hands scarred from World War II shrapnel and a heart stubborn. Her neighborhood. What she actually did was commit federal arson on a piece of registered heritage property, and she did it to the one man in this county who knew exactly how to bury her in legal hell. I'd moved back to Iowa's Windermere County 3 years earlier after my wife, Margaret, passed away from cancer. After decades on the bench, I wanted silence, not the kind that comes from Dear 620. But the world had changed. My nearest neighbor wasn't a farmer anymore. It was an HOA president in heels and pearls, ruling her development like a suburban dictatorship. Brenda Whitmore. Countdown to war. The first time she showed up, I was elbow deep in the tractor engine, motor oil on my hands, coffee cooling on the fence post beside me. Mr. Callahan, she said in that syrupy sweet tone real estate agents use when they're about to ruin your day. I'm Brenda Whitmore, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your agricultural structures. I looked up at her, then at my barn glowing red in the morning light, standing proud the way my grandfather built it. Ma'am, I said, wiping my hands. That barn's been here since Truman was president. Your HOA's got no jurisdiction here. Her smile tightened, just a fraction, like she was swallowing a lemon. Mr. Callahan, our community's property values depend on maintaining certain standards of appearance. That structure is visible from 17 homes, and, frankly, it's unpleasant. I wanted to laugh, but something in her eyes told me she wasn't joking. She leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to draw blood. There are many creative ways to solve community problems, Mr. Callahan. I do hope you won't force us to explore them. Now, when you've spent your career listening to criminals threaten witnesses, you recognize that tone immediately. Brenda's creative solutions weren't creative at all. They were coercion. Thicket looked bulletproof. His hands shook as he spoke. Mr. Callahan, sir, I've got some complaints here. Noise, dust, rodents, improper storage, environmental concerns. I counted them. 14 complaints, all anonymous, all filed in a single week about a farm that hadn't changed in 70 years. Dale looked miserable, sweat beading under his hat. Let me guess, I said. She'd just handed me a loaded gun, metaphorically speaking, with her fingerprints all over it. Dale, I said quietly, you familiar with Iowa's Right to Farm Act? He blinked. Can't say that I am. Well, Chapter 352 protects agricultural operations from nuisance ordinances, especially those established before the surrounding development. Your complaints are all nuisance-based, which means this whole enforcement campaign is illegal. Whoever's pushing you into this, they're not just wrong, they're gambling you don't know the law. He went pale. Are you saying I'm breaking the law? I'm saying you're being used, son. I told him, snapping photos of his clipboard. And when the time comes, I'll need honest men like you who can testify to that fact. He left that morning looking like he'd aged 10 years, but I knew what I had to do. Every visit, every note, every phone call, I documented it all. Because in my world, enforcement activity, I let her talk. She liked the sound of her own threats. Ma'am, I said finally, what you're doing qualifies as abuse of power and harassment under both state and federal law. Keep it up, and you'll find yourself in a courtroom you don't control. She laughed, that brittle, hollow laugh of someone who's never heard the word no. Mr. Callahan, you may find that difficult neighbors tend to attract difficult problems. That was the moment she crossed the line from arrogance to stupidity. 10 days later, I was served with a lawsuit, a 40-page masterpiece of fiction claiming my barn was structurally unsound, a threat to public safety, and, my personal favorite, a potential terrorist concealment site. I almost spit my coffee across the table. The letterhead read Hawthorne, Sterling and Briggs, a Des Moines firm known for bulldozing rural holdouts. The kind of firm you hire when you want to weaponize the law. Someone was spending big money, which meant there was a bigger game afoot. So I dug through the county land records, and sure enough, the pieces started connecting like a crime scene board. Over the past 18 months, husband's construction firm, they weren't trying to protect property values. They were assembling an empire, and my 47 acres sat right in the middle of it. That's when I called Michael. Are you telling me some HOA queen just violated your constitutional rights? Oh, this is going to be fun. Within 72 hours, he filed a federal countersuit so comprehensive it could have been taught in law school. And right about then, my phone buzzed with a call that changed everything. Judge Callahan, a woman's voice said. This is Special Agent Sarah Kowalski, FBI. We've been tracking a series of rural land fraud cases. Elderly farmers, veterans, minorities, harassed into selling to shell companies. Your HOA president just lit up our radar. I leaned back, letting the sound of her words settle. Well, Agent Kowalski, I said, you might want to bring a few extra folders. You're going to need them. From there, everything escalated like a slow-burning thriller. My neighbors started coming forward, one by one, whispering their own Brenda horror stories. Marcus Rivera, a young dad with tired eyes, told me she fined him $80 for leaving a basketball hoop up after sunset. His wife got written warnings for sidewalk chalk drawings, graffiti, Brenda called them. Mrs. Liu, a 70-year-old widow, was fined $200 for hanging her laundry outside because, apparently, clean clothes offended community standards. Tom Peterson, a Marine veteran, got violations every time he parked his motorcycle in his own driveway. It wasn't about rules. It was about control and fear. When Marcus said, Judge, if you ever take her down, half this neighborhood will cheer, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. This was a full-blown civil rights battle, hiding in plain sight behind white picket fences. And then came the night everything burned. 3:17 a.m., November wind screaming through the fields. I woke up to the smell of smoke and saw the sky glowing orange from my bedroom window. The barn, Patrick's barn, was a wall of fire. By the time firefighters arrived, the structure was gone. What remained was ash, twisted metal, and a rage inside me I hadn't felt since my early years on the bench. That cold, focused kind of fury that doesn't yell, doesn't cry, it builds. At 4:23 a.m., I called Agent Kowalski. Federal arson, I said, steady voice, steady breath. Veterans Heritage Property. I've got footage, motive, and a prime suspect. She didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. Worse still, buried in her financial disclosures was a $2.4 million stock holding in Heartland Urban Development, the same firm listed on all those land purchases. She wasn't a petty tyrant. That's when the real war began. The FBI wired my property. Michael assembled a legal strike team. And by the end of that week, my dining room had turned into a federal command center. Agents sorting files, analysts tracing shell corporations, lawyers drafting motions. The whole thing felt surreal. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been tinkering with tractors. Now, I was the centerpiece in A. 2 other agents, Rodriguez and Thompson, wired my walls and set up surveillance monitors that hummed quietly beneath the smell of coffee and burned oak drifting through broken windows. Judge, Sarah said, sliding a photo toward me. We've confirmed the Whitmores are the Iowa hub of a multi-state racket. We've got identical operations in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. No Brenda spies allowed. When I walked into that basement, I expected maybe half a dozen people. There were 47. They came carrying boxes, binders, shoeboxes full of violation notices. Photos, receipts, years of petty tyranny turned into evidence. Mrs. Liu brought a pile of $200 fines for non-compliant laundry. Tom Peterson laid out pictures of Brenda's inspectors measuring his grass with rulers. Jennifer Wells, a single mom, played recordings of Brenda threatening to have her kids removed because her garden gnome attracted the wrong kind of people. As I looked around that room, I realized this wasn't just corruption. It was psychological warfare, one woman using bureaucracy as a weapon against her own community. I told them, you've been living under dictatorship disguised as neighborhood management. Tonight, we changed that. They cheered quietly, the kind of cheer that comes from people remembering what courage feels like. 2 days later, my surveillance cameras caught Brenda's white Mercedes idling by my driveway at 2:14 a.m., 3 minutes before my power went out again. The vanity plate glowed clear as day under infrared. Building momentum, Brenda made her boldest move yet. At exactly 10 a.m. Tuesday, her Mercedes pulled up my drive, shining like a pearl in the sun. She wasn't alone. With her came County Commissioner Robert Fitzgerald, a man built like a bulldog in a too-tight suit, sweating confidence and cheap cologne. "Mr. Callahan," Brenda said with that honey and vinegar tone, "we think there's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to make things right." I let them inside, offered coffee, knowing every inch of that room was wired for sound. Commissioner Fitzgerald cleared his throat. "Judge, we're prepared to make you a generous offer. $400,000, cash, 30-day close, no inspections. $400,000 for land worth over $1 million. Brenda smiled. "All polished teeth and poison. We can resolve the insurance issues, the lawsuit, the fire." Quietly, I sipped my coffee, steady as stone. "And if I say no?" Fitzgerald leaned forward, voice dropping low. "Then things might get complicated. Tax reassessments, environmental inspections, infrastructure reviews. These things take time, cost money." They were offering a bribe in a. The next 48 hours turned into open season on anyone who'd ever stood near me. Marcus's wife, Maria, got fired from her job at the county hospital. Budget cuts, they said, even though she'd just earned a performance bonus. Mrs. Liu received notice that her home was being reassessed for overvaluation. Tom Peterson was cited for noise violations despite his motorcycle sitting cold in the garage. Jennifer Wells had child services show up for an anonymous tip. It was witness intimidation, plain and simple. When I told Sarah, she slammed her folder shut. Good. Every new retaliation adds another 20 years to their sentences. Let them keep digging. Then came Brenda's media blitz. She hired Meridian Crisis Management out of Chicago, the same firm that polished the reputations of disgraced senators and CEOs. Within days, the local paper was running opinion pieces calling me a bitter ex-judge lashing out at progress. Anonymous social media. It stung. You spend a lifetime protecting justice, and suddenly your name's being dragged through the mud by bots and PR hacks. But the FBI's forensic lab tore that audio apart in hours. 17 splices, mismatched speech patterns, digital forgery, so sloppy it might as well have come with Brenda's signature. "Judge," Sarah said, "they just committed evidence tampering." 6 business owners and 3 real estate lawyers were now under federal scrutiny. The whole machine Brenda built was collapsing piece by piece. But she made one last desperate gamble, and it was almost brilliant in its insanity. Brenda filed a court petition claiming I was mentally unfit, alleging paranoid delusions and erratic behavior. The document was signed by Dr. Gerald Hopkins, brother of the very same code officer she'd used months earlier, and approved by Judge Timothy Fitzgerald, the commissioner's nephew. They were trying to have me involuntarily committed. "I'm just following orders." "Then follow this one," I told him. "Start writing down every name that told you to do this. You're going to need it when the indictments drop." That night, Sarah called. "Judge," she said, her voice low and fierce, "we're ready. The U.S. Attorney's Office just approved grand jury indictments for 14 defendants, including Brenda Whitmore and Commissioner Fitzgerald. We'll make the arrests tomorrow night, during the HOA meeting. Publicly." I walked outside, into the cold November air, the stars sharp above the blackened field where my barn once stood. I could almost hear my grandfather's hammer ringing in the wind. Tomorrow, it would end. The next evening, the Maple Ridge Community Center was packed beyond capacity. 400 people, crammed into a hall meant for 200, sweat and tension thick in the air. Reporters lined the back wall. The faint hum of phones recording filled the silence like static. Brenda strutted to the podium, draped in navy Armani and arrogance. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to address the malicious rumors being spread by certain individuals who refuse to respect community standards." The crowd murmured, not support, not agreement, but that uneasy sound of people who've seen the curtain lift and the magician bleed through the illusion. I stood in the back. "Mrs. Whitmore," I called out, "may I speak?" Her jaw clenched. "You'll have your chance during public comment, Mr. Callahan." Before she could continue, Sarah Kowalski rose from the front row, flashing her grandfather's charred hammer sealed in a clear evidence bag. I placed it on the podium, the sound echoing like a gavel striking the end of a long trial. My name, I said, voice steady, is Judge Samuel Callahan, retired. 3 months ago, Mrs. Whitmore burned down my family's barn, a registered heritage structure, because she thought she could bully a man off his land. Shell companies, property transfers. The crowd gasped. For 18 months, I continued, this woman and her associates used county resources to harass elderly residents, veterans. Room like thunder. The silence that followed could have frozen fire. Then Sarah stepped forward. Brenda Whitmore, she said, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, bribery. Tried to bolt for the exit, but ran straight into Agent Rodriguez's shoulder. Outside, red and blue lights flared against the community center windows as federal agents swarmed. I looked at Brenda. As the cuffs clicked around her wrists. You once told me there were creative ways to solve community problems, I said quietly. Turns out you were right. Federal prison is very creative. The hammering echoed like a heartbeat returning to life. Brenda Whitmore pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, and civil rights violations, earning 12 years in federal prison and over $2 million in restitution. Commissioner Fitzgerald got 8. Others followed. The entire network collapsed like a rotted beam, finally giving way. The new HOA, led by Marcus Rivera, rewrote everything, opened budgets, term limits, and independent ombudsman. They called it the Callahan Reforms. Mrs. Liu started a historical society to document the nightmare, so no one would ever forget. Tom Peterson hung a massive American flag from his porch, and no one dared measure it. Jennifer Wells planted a line of garden gnomes in front of the HOA office, 20 of them, all wearing tiny free speech signs. The restitution money went into community projects and scholarships. My rebuilt barn became a legal clinic, where we helped rural families fight back against corrupt HOAs and local bullies. 200 cases in the first year, 98% success. Turns out there were a lot of Brendas out there, and none of them expected their victims to unite. Every autumn, because some fights never really end. They just move down the road, waiting for someone stubborn enough to pick them up again. So here's the question I leave you with. When power hides behind rules and paperwork, when bullies wear suits instead of badges, what do we owe our neighbors, our history, ourselves? Do we walk away for peace, or do we stand up and rebuild the barn? Justice.